Our next panel is focused on security. We have two guests. I'll introduce the first guest, and then he has 6 slides to show you, and then I'll introduce you to the second guest. Hayden Povey is here with us from the United Kingdom. He is the CEO and founder of a startup company called Secure Things, where he's focused on next-generation security for IoT and connected devices. Before this, he has had a very illustrious career, but his 10 years at ARM, he was responsible for ARM's security, such as TrustZone. And before the security responsibility at ARM, he was in charge of development of the ARM Cortex-M series. Please welcome Hayden Povey. Why don't you have a seat here? And then
Okay. Let me find a mic that works. There we are. Okay.
you have to hold it close.
Have to hold it close. Okay, well, again, thank you very much for this opportunity, Ali. I'm very pleased, very proud to be in front of all you guys at this very illustrious event. What I wanted to do this evening is talk a little bit around the future of security. Ali asked me to come out with what are the 3 big challenges in security, and perhaps there's 4 there. The first one being to define the 3, because there are massive challenges for the whole of security. And perhaps the 5th one is to try and fit it in only 6 or so slides. So when we started talking about what are the big challenges, what are the grand challenges for security, my mind immediately went to, okay, how do we define grand challenges? And I went back to the original UN Millennium Development Goals here, and there's some huge requirements here, some huge goals for humanity. But all of them kind of rely on the bottom right, which is a global partnership for development. And I think that this is also true for security. It's also very true for IoT in general. We can't develop the future in isolation. We have to do it together. And as I say, this is especially true, I think, of security, because we have such big challenges to try and address. So, where do you start? I started by saying, okay, well, the 3 which I come across the most when I talk to customers, when I talk to clients, are confidentiality. How do we deal with privacy? How do we deal with data? How do we find that balance between the need of the individual, whether it's a company or whether it is a private citizen, and the need to share data, to create new services, to drive efficiency? Simplicity is the next big one as well, and I have very specifically called it simplicity rather than complexity. Because we have to get to IoT systems where security is embedded in it and where it delivers that simplicity which consumers can consume. Complexity, on the other hand, is a very, very scary place where we really don't want to be. And then lifecycle. So as we look at devices in the IoT being, having a life cycle of 10 years for white goods, 20 years for cars, 20 years for HVAC systems, how do we manage security over these very extended periods? We're kind of used to 2 or 3 years with a mobile phone. So let's come back, start off with confidentiality. There are a lot of social issues, a lot of social challenges, as well as technology challenges around confidentiality and privacy. We have to ask ourselves, who owns the data? Is it the individual? Is it the company? Is it the person that we have a service contract with? As we push more and more data into the cloud, and we have big data analytics behind that, how do we manage anonymity? How do we manage services behind that? These are really important questions for the entire future of the IoT. Because if we get it wrong, we lose the consumer. They're just going to stop buying stuff. So we have to figure out how we find those balances. So one of the things that we're doing, and we've worked very closely with Renesas around the Synergy platform, and some of you may have seen it, we had on the expo floor over this week. Using Synergy, we've created some partitioning. We're using the capability in there to develop isolation between different components of the system. But fundamentally, I think the three things that we need to look at are authentication and authorization. Who has the right to join a network? Who has the capability to make changes in our systems? We need to look at threat monitoring. We need to look and understand where our data is going. How many people on their phones today understand where all of their data goes? How many people go down their applications switching off data sharing? Can we do that with the IoT? Probably not today, not to the same extent, but we need to kind of evolve that. And then anonymization is a really important part. In a lot of cases, we have so much data going out to the cloud that you can follow the breadcrumbs. So even if you start to try and hide people's information, you can still piece it back together. You can still link it back to an individual. And that's not only dangerous, in many ways it can be criminal. So we have to understand what we're doing with our consumers' data. We have to help them manage that better. We have to help them find that balance as well. And hey, we all know if it's a choice between privacy and a video of a dancing cat, the dancing cat wins every time. So, we have to help our end customers understand these problems better as well. So the next challenge, simplicity in a complex system. So here's a picture of Manhattan. Fairly high density place, but having been in Tokyo recently, it's got nothing on there. So a couple of pieces of data on Manhattan. We have 750,000 households. We have about 23 square miles of land. And if we grow that to 30 devices per household, that's 1 million devices per square mile, perhaps cubic mile given the tall buildings. So we have 1 million devices or more, 50, if we have 50 per household, it goes up even further. We have huge issues around manageability. We have huge issues around the noise in the air, how we connect, how we authenticate devices, how we manage uniqueness. IPv6, even with its very large size, doesn't give you enough cryptographic uniqueness to manage those systems. We have to take it further. We have to think about how mathematically we are going to make systems unique so that we can manage these very large, very complex systems and hopefully make them easy. And at the same time, right in the middle there is power. If all of these things are existing on batteries, that's, how many million batteries? We don't want to be replacing those. So our security, our cryptography can't be consuming too much power. So we have a lot of problems around managing simplicity in that type of complex system. The third area I just quickly wanted to touch on is lifecycle, as I said earlier. We're very used to the life cycle of our mobile phones being 2 to 3 years. We throw them away. We're very used to the life cycle of our PC perhaps being 4 or 5 years. Both of those things have very good security today. My team designed a lot of the security in the high-end mobile smartphones that we see today and worked with the MNOs to roll those out. But in the IoT, we're going to see stuff which exists for 20, 30 plus years. So we have to figure not just how we establish trust, not just how we engender trust in the devices when we sell them, when we accept them into systems and authenticate them, but also how we maintain trust over these very long periods, I think. You know, so we all know Heartbleed came along, everybody went, wow, SSLs, you know, it's been shot to hell. How do we update that? Now, it's bad enough when that's in a router in our study or under the stairs, but when it's embedded in every device in our house, that's a real problem. So we then have to look at how we do updates, how we manage over-the-air remediation of devices. We have to presume that every device is going to be compromised at some point, because that's just the reality. That's kind of the threat that we face is, you know, we're going to lose, because we have to be right 100% of the time. The attacker only has to be right once. And nobody in this room, I don't think anybody on the planet, could guarantee that they write 100% perfect code, yeah? The other interesting one at the end there is we have to also think about how we destroy trust at the end of the life of a product. We can't go away and just throw away this thing and it's still got our keys in it. We may also be selling things on. It might be a car, so how do we pass on ownership of the car? It might be we're moving house and somebody else takes ownership of our HVAC system. So we have to think over a lot larger domain than we traditionally do with embedded systems and even with phones and with PCs. These are really huge, multifaceted problems. They are very, very difficult to solve. But I think that we can only try and attempt to solve them together. Nobody in this room, not me, not any of you, I think, can get our minds around all of the aspects of security. We can only do that when we do it together. And I think, again, the call to action from this, if you like, is, you know, devices and systems are, of course, only as strong as the weakest link in the chain. If you're developing an expensive system, you know, if you put in a cheap device which doesn't have the right security, that's where the attackers are going to go. So again, we have to think about this as an ecosystem. We have to look after each other's backs. We have to try and keep the bad guys out. And we have to understand what we have to do for our consumers over the long term. So I think there's a lot of good things that we can do. There's a lot of good technology coming through with Synergy and the other platforms. But there's a lot more to do, and those really are 3 grand challenges. Thank you.